am Linda van Tilburg. After failing to secure a majority in the 29 May elections, the ANC that has governed South Africa since 1994 has decided that a government of national unity is their preferred model to govern. This is a concept that South Africa is familiar with, particularly Roelf Meyer, one of the architects of the Constitution in the 1990s. And he was a key figure alongside President Ramaphosa in the negotiation process. And he's joining us today to discuss the challenges of negotiations and power sharing in South Africa. Hi, Roelf. Welcome.
Good day. It's good to be on your program.
So we're having a bit of déjà vu at the moment in South Africa. So the decision that the ANC and Mr. Ramaphosa made, is that the right path forward?
You know, I think that there are a number of options that the ANC and the president could have considered as far as going forward is concerned. Obviously, some form of coalition government or joint government, whatever it's called, has to be formed, because the ANC is only got 40%. And that means that I think a number of options were considered. In my view, and I've thought about it a lot since last weekend when the results came out, in my view, the government of national unity idea or concept is actually probably the best under the circumstances. And the reason I'm saying so is it would allow for maximum inclusive participation by the different parties, none of which has a clear majority. And I think it's the better option to allow for a number of parties to participate, to welcome actually a broad range of parties to participate. If they don't want to, then it's another case. It's up to them. And I think the approach that, years ago in the 1990s, we followed by allowing parties to also withdraw when they don't want to participate, is the right model and an appropriate model also under the circumstances. In other words, the seats will be available, but if they don't come to participate, then it's up to them. So, in a nutshell, I think the government of national unity is probably the best concept to work with under the current circumstances.
Mr. Ramaphosa has been severely criticized in the past years for the way he's managed the ANC, the way that some people think he has put his party above the government. But this is clearly his territory. Negotiations is his thing. So do you think his chances of success is good?
I think he has a clear vision of where he wants to take the country at this point of time under the current circumstances. And just by the way, he has been criticized for his lack of firm decision-making and or firm implementation of policy issues and so forth. I think his reliance on ensuring unity within the ANC was probably at the core of that way in which he conducted his business as party leader and as president of the country over the last 5 years. I think some elements in the ANC, quite frankly, let him down in that process. And now it's at the stage where unity is not longer being practiced by the ANC. We have a breakaway group that is quite substantial called the Incompetence Party, which is essentially ANC members that left the organization. And I think this provides for President Ramaphosa the opportunity actually to go forward in a way that he thinks would be best for the country. I followed his statement of Friday evening very clearly, Thursday evening. I followed his statement on Thursday evening, and he was very clear in his pronouncements, seeking the best interest of the country. The national interest, he emphasized more than once, comes first. And he is seeking to form a government based on certain principles, foremost of which it is the principles contained in our Constitution, Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. and Chapter 2 being the Bill of Rights. And I think he was very clear in that, and in my understanding, he will follow that vision of forming a new government for the country, which will be in the best interest of all citizens of the country.
So in terms of this inclusivity, which a government of national unity needs, so if the EFF says, no, they can't be there with the DA, and the MK party, I mean, they want to abolish the constitutions. Clearly, there's no space for them in a government of national unity. But Mr. Ramaphosa, I think, would probably keep on talking to them, I would guess. So how do you manage that with these very strong external forces against you?
Well, the two parties that you've referred to, the EFF and the MK, combined have about 25% of the votes, 25% of the vote. And, so it's not an ignorable group within the voter population of the country. But on the other hand, I think one can also say that probably 70% of those that casted their vote in this election would support Mr. Ramaphosa, would support his line of thinking and what the ANC had presented as their solution for the country. And I think that is what has to be weighed up. So if 25% say they don't want to participate, it's up to them. Keep their seats open, like I said earlier. But if they don't want to participate, it is for them to decide, and then they are in opposition to this government that is to be formed. That is the line of thinking that I would follow, and that is what I suggest that South Africans, or at least the 70% of South Africans that I'm referring to, would prefer. We need a government that can go forward and govern properly.
So how do you accommodate even smaller parties? There are some smaller parties who now want to go to Judge Zondo. I'm not sure what he could do. How do you accommodate, like Musi Maimami's Bossa? He's one of the ones that have, done this. Is there a way to bring them in?
Well, if you count all the votes of those 5 or 6 parties together, I'm afraid it still doesn't come to 5% even. So you have to draw a line somewhere and say, okay, we carry on and we do what is necessary. And that is why I keep on referring to the 70% that probably will support a government of national unity based on the principles outlined by the president.
So what should the percentage be of support that you need to be a part of the government of national unity?
There is no threshold, and there is, under the current circumstances, no prescription as far as that is concerned. But I think it's for every party to decide whether they want to be, coming forward and participate. There are certainly 1 or 2 small parties that even less than 1% of them that would consider participating if they are invited to come forward and participate in some other form. And I know of them that I know individuals who discussed it this week, the possibility of participating, and I think it's most likely that they will. So there is no threshold. That's the starting point. And the president was not inviting some parties and others not. He said, let's make it an inclusive process. But those that don't want to participate, it's up to them. And, I keep on arguing that as far as the majority of probably 70%, it would be fine to go forward and do what is necessary for the sake of the country.
President Ramaphosa is reported to have sought the guidance of Thabo Mbeki to be part of what he calls a body of elders to guide the talks. Is that a position you would consider?
If you ask me personally, no, it's not something that I think I can play a role in, and I've not been invited. But it's up to the president. I think the president is seeking, the support of his elders, mostly within the ANC, people that have gone through government experience. President Mbeki, another person is President Kgalema Motlanthe. So I think that those are possibilities to consult, at least under the current circumstances, and if they would be helpful in coming to a solution, then so be it.
Well, can we look at some of the red lines of the Democratic Alliance. First of all, they want a constitutional framework for all of this, and I think Mr. Ramaphosa would probably agree on that. But there's some sticking points, cadre deployment, that they might want to have a view on, and the other is devolution of powers to the provinces. So that was a sticking point originally, so this is coming up again, and especially with quite a strong lobby in the Western Cape asking for a separate state. So how do you deal with that? How does he deal with that?
Yeah, I'm not so sure how strong that lobby is.
Okay.
I know there are people who would argue for that, but similarly, we had such arguments 30 years ago. There was a strong argument, by the way, within the IFP at the time and within the Zuma community that have argued for separation of KwaZulu-Natal at the time. But I think the point is that there are going to be certain issues that are more important than others to find agreement on, to get a government of national unity cooperating, or parties cooperating with an government of national unity to go forward. And my argument, and I've expressed my view publicly several times this week, I think one has to work from the top down in seeking the agreements. The starting point, of course, is the Constitution. And I think there's a majority of opinion within the parties that would consider participating in the government of national unity, that they subscribe to the Constitution. I think that is a precondition that nobody can walk away from if they want to participate. And then the Bill of Rights is a clear prescription that I think also the parties should subscribe to. And then you will find a number of issues that are of lesser or more importance. One is, for instance, the land issue, which is an unresolved point of consideration and contestation even over the past 30 years. My view, for instance, in that regard is, let's take a different look at how we can resolve the land issue. And there are ways to address this. And by the proposition I would like to put forward for consideration is to say, let's come forward with something completely new. Because if the current provisions, policies, have not delivered what is required by the people of South Africa, let's find another way to adhere to the provisions of the Constitution, because the Constitution is very clear on the subject of land. It's an imperative that there shall be land redistribution. But if it hasn't happened, then it means we have to find another way to do it, to follow the provisions of the Constitution. And I think that is the kind of thing, and I use this as an example to say, I think the government of national unity, when it comes into being, provides an excellent opportunity for parties to look anew at finding solutions for the country. The same would apply to black economic empowerment, which is a form in the flesh of some political participants, and similarly, for instance, the subject of national health insurance, which is very new in our debates. But again, I think it's important that the parties participating in the government of national unity say, okay, let us look jointly on how this can be addressed so that the people of South Africa, the country's citizens, can benefit from new policies that can deliver, instead of hanging in the air and reaching a lot of dissatisfaction.
Well, if we look at 1994, there was a lot of violence before that. There was a lot of strife between the IFP and the ANC. And what solved it is by bringing the IFP into the process at the very last minute. But if you leave MK out of whatever happens, with their policies, whatever the reason is, and a very good reasons to leave them out, isn't there a danger of violence, of them trying to disrupt or derail the systems, or even use, something, other means to try to overthrow the state?
I think it is going to be very important to try and accommodate the group that's being represented by the Communist Party. And the majority of the support that they have drawn in this past election last week would probably come from the Zulu community. And if that is so, one must also ask the question, why did they succeed within a very short period of time, since September last year, basically, to draw such a lot of support within a particular part of South Africa, and that is KwaZulu-Natal province. And by finding out the reasons why, I think it can be addressed and it should be addressed to ensure that there is participation by those that represent that community, and make sure that they don't feel left out, because that might be one of the reasons that they have left sheltered. They've not been considered sufficiently as part of the South African political environment. And if they feel they've been left out, ignored, or that they feel angry about certain matters that the government has dealt with in a certain way in the past period of time, then those have to be addressed. You can't ignore it. Otherwise, you create a situation that could spill over into violence. But at the same time, going forward, one can't be kept under a threat on a continuous basis, like Mr. Zuma did last Saturday. He's threatened the IEC and said, if you release the results, there will be trouble. I think that IEC handled it perfectly by standing firm and saying, we're not going to listen to this threat because there is no proof that the vote count was wrong or that there were defaults. And therefore they went ahead and announced the results on Sunday. So I think, what they did there was, I think, a good model of saying you can't stay under the threat of people that believe they have certain rights above others.
Yeah, so you're going to need a strong leader for this. Does Mr. Ramaphosa, will he be able to live up to that?
Well, I think what he had done by means of the state Thursday evening, he had made very clear the lines along which he would take the country forward as the president and as the leader of the party that forms the majority after the election. And he was very clear on that, and I think, if I read him correctly, he's going to stand firm. He will obviously need some of his comrades, so to speak, to negotiate and to consult with the people from KwaZulu-Natal to see how their fears, their anger, their feeling of being neglected can be addressed. And that should not be President Ramaphosa alone that do that or does that. I think he will have to get others to come and help him in fulfilling that process of bringing along those that might feel unhappy.
So how do you see the timeline? Because there's literally a week left before Parliament sits, I think, on the 18th of June. And on that day, the president has to be elected and the speaker. So do you see them getting support, make me president, and then we negotiate sort of a longer timeline for this? Because you would need a lot of time to get this through.
There might be issues that have to be addressed after the first coming together of the new parliament. The deadline is the 18th of June, according to the Constitution. The Chief Justice is in charge of that, the swearing in of the new members of Parliament, and also then the election of the new president by the new National Assembly. But there will be time after that to address further consequential issues. Inter alia, the formation of a new government. So I think there will be a bit of time, not indefinite, but I think it will be possible to address this going forward and finding the best possible solutions. I personally think that this will be done, and it has to be done in the interest of the country. But like I said earlier, at some point a line has to be drawn. You can't carry on indefinitely with consensus seeking, and if relevant participants in the process don't play the game, then it's clear you have to go forward. Like I said in my earlier argument, at least 70% of the people have casted their vote in favor of some other form of joint government going forward, running the country.
So how should the international community who's keenly watching this view the developments right now?
Well, I'm sure the international community, more than us in South Africa even, aware of the fact that similar circumstances prevailed in other countries. There were quite a number of such in Europe in recent times. And for South Africa, it's a first, because we've been exposed to one ruling party for 30 years, since 1994. And now for the first time, we have the experience of trying to form a government where there is no one only ruling party. So I think the international community will understand that it takes time, and I think we have to seek also guidance in some cases from the international community on how do you deal with situations like this. What is important for me, and I've said it time and again this past week, is that this is a form of democratic practice. Our constitution is being respected and adhered to, except maybe for one party. But the vast majority of South Africans respect our constitution, and the guidelines as far as the constitution is clear. And we will go forward and practice that and find the solutions also in line with that.
Should we take courage from the fact that the ANC accepted their election result, unlike Donald Trump in America, who did not accept their election result? I mean, does it mean our democracy is actually strong?
Well, I think that is the point. It shows that we respect our constitution and the democratic provisions and principles underlying in the constitution. There was no debate about it, and I think that is the beauty of the current situation. Democracy prevails, and I'm sure we will keep on doing that going forward.
Roelf Meyer, thanks so much for speaking to us.
Thank you.